I am not condoning premarital or extramarital sex. Under no circumstances do I condone that. Okay? So Paul singled out some groups and offered marital advice. He said to the unmarried and the widows, it is well for them to remain single even as he was. To those who have lost their partners, he recommended his own marital status, which was single. Paul likely was a widower and therefore single. However, remarriage was preferable to letting passions consume the individual. In other words, what he's saying is that it's better for you to go ahead and get married if your passions are going to consume you until you're not able to function, you're not able to carry on, until you just feel like I've got to have sex, I've got to have it. Then you need to get a partner, you need to get married and get you a partner. The marriage, the believer in faith gave the marriage and the children a special protective relationship. He encouraged believers to remain with an unbelieving spouse. Believers were not to divorce unbelievers because you got saved and then before you got saved you were married to this guy and he's not saved and neither were you, and then you become a Christian and all of a sudden he's dirty and no good. You don't like him, you can't stand him, you don't want to be bothered with him, you don't want to sleep in the same bed with him because he's a sinful sinner, a drunken. Hey, you can't do that. You can't jump out of bed with him and you married to him because you got saved and he didn't and he's so disgustingly dirty now. No, you got to pray that the Lord will clean him up like he cleaned you up. He wasn't so dirty and nasty before you got to be a Christian and saved. So now that you are, you've got to hang in there until the Lord saves him. Now, if he decides to leave, then you're free. Now, that's what Paul is saying. If the unbeliever leaves, then that frees the person that is the believer. But now, it doesn't give you the right to drive them away. All right, get that good. Don't drive them away. If they decide on their own that marriage is not the thing for them to be married to a Christian and they decide to leave, then they're free and it frees you. And he says that the believer then is free to remarry. The believer should permit the divorce. Now, that's going deep, but this is what he's saying. However, he said if the unbelieving spouse desired to divorce the believing spouse, then the believer should permit the divorce. And then the believer then was free to remarry. Now, this is what Paul is saying. Don't run them away, don't drive them away, but if they decide to go and they are an unbeliever and you are a believer, then you're free to remarry. Okay, sex and marriage are such front-burning topics that you don't need to worry about generating discussion about it because it's something that has been closet for so long because people have not really talked about sex. They've never talked about courting. It's something that was just taboo. You didn't talk about it. The Corinthian church was caught up in a thing about sex outside of marriage that devastated them to the point that even when folk got married, that they felt like sex was dirty and unclean. And another thing that we have to face today is that many of us are not very open when it comes down to sex. We don't talk about it to our children before they're married. We do not talk about it to people who are not married, who are about to get married. And it's something that's just never discussed. And so when a person gets married, they get married green. They don't know anything. And what they learn, they have to learn out in the street. And I'm a firm believer that sex should be taught within the Christian community. If they can teach it in school, and I don't care, you can call me, I stand on this conviction. They teach it in school, they teach it on the street, they learn all kind of degrading sexual habits until the only right way, I think, is to be taught in church that we should not closet sex when it comes down to marriage, that we should talk about this because it is such an integral part of our lives. Many of you, before you got saved, you were involved in sexual relationships, and now that you're saved and in church and you're married, you're holding back And that's something that I think we should discuss, that we should let our young people and old folk know who are getting married that marriage is honorable and the bed is undefiled, that a good, healthy sexual relationship between husbands and wives is necessary to maintain a good mental stability. It's something that has not been discussed, and people are closet about it, but you don't have to worry. When you bring it up, you'll find that a lot of people got a lot of questions about sex. Your problem, in fact, may be to keep the conversation on the biblical material as well as the sociological issues, because when you start talking about sex, everybody got all kinds of questions about sex, especially when it pertains to the Christian, to the believer in marriage. What is permissible? What is not permissible? What can I do? What can I do? And there are some people that want to live on the perimeter, that's right on the edge. They want to do just enough to stay in and just enough not to fall out. Okay. Those folk have got to have a clear understanding with their partners as to which way to go and what do we do and how do we go about it. Every marriage is different. Okay, you've got to understand where you're coming from. There is a psychological effect that sex has on married folk. All right, write your questions down. I got to skip over this. I've been on it too long now. So write your questions down for this lesson. That's March 17, guidance about marriage. Okay, you got it? Any questions that you have about sex, about marriage, call me. I'll answer your questions. I told you tonight that I would deal with it, and I'm going to do my best to deal with it because I gave you my word, okay? I said I do not condone premarital sex, okay? Now, next question, somebody called and said, can you remarry after the believer has left? Yes. Paul said if the unbeliever leaves, then that frees the believer to remarry. I think that marriage, people that are married, you all have to get together in your marriage. You can't bring outsiders into your marriage if you want to have a successful marriage. I said on last week a lot of things about marriage that I can back up. I'm not going to say anything that I cannot back up. Paul said, and somebody just called and asked me the question personally, when Paul said it's better to marry than to burn, do I think it's wrong to get married just for sex? Yes, definitely, because see, when the sex is over, you got to live together. I said this on last week. I think that compatibility is most important. Call me. Any question you want to ask, stay on the line and ask the question, okay? Call. I'll talk to you personally. Do not call here and leave a message with my ministers for them to write down and bring it to me. Talk to me. Talk to me direct so that you won't have to go off saying, he said, she said, they said. Get it from me direct. Okay? I think that everybody should understand where Paul is coming from. These were problems that existed among married folk. These married folks were abstaining from sex. They felt like it was dirty, it was filthy, it was unclean, which is not true. Sex is wonderful when people are married in love and you are in love with each other. Sex is the culmination, it is the grand finale of a wonderful relationship that married folk have. And this is what I think Christians should understand. You cannot just say, look, I'm saved and I don't do that. Listen, if you save, you ought to have a wonderful relationship. All right, give us a call. Love you. We'll be here. Answer your questions, whatever it is. Give us a call because Jesus is a miracle worker. He'll work one for you. Come on, give us a call. Love you.